Well, hey, biology, hope you're doing well when you watch this. Today I'm going to be going over two lessons with you, just kind of like the highlights, so you can better understand, at least from me, what you should know and what you should be learning. The first one we're going to look at is chapter 17, section 3, Darwin's Theory, Natural Selection. Here are the objectives that I hope to present to you today and achieve with you today. Students will describe the conditions for and the mechanism of natural selection. So we're going to understand natural selection. And students will explain what evolutionary theory suggests about the unity and diversity of life and contrast that with the creation account in Genesis. So these are the two objectives, at least for section 3, that we're going to talk about. So Darwin went on this crazy journey, right? 5 years. He's getting all his thoughts together. Remember, he's on the boat, not just him alone. He has all these philosophers and thinkers and scientists and their thoughts with him as well, and the books and his memories. His colleagues are around him. And so Alfred Wallace, you watched that video, but Alfred Wallace also was thinking about similar ideas. When Darwin realized that Wallace was thinking about these ideas, he rushed to publish his thoughts first. And he wrote those thoughts in his book, published it, The Origin of Species, a classic work in uh, life science realm. Proposed a mechanism for evolution called natural selection. It proposed and explained the evidence that he saw on his trip that evolution has been happening for millions of years. So from the observations and insights made on the voyage and new ideas from geologists, Darwin developed an explanatory theory for evolutionary change. So number one, species change over time. He saw this. He realized this. He saw different fossils on his trips. Number two, the divergent species share a common ancestor. He called this descent with modification. We all share a common ancestor according to evolution. This is not what the Bible teaches, and I'll explain that here in a little bit. The mechanism that produces change is natural selection. So natural selection, there are basically two major themes in natural selection. You need to be able to kind of explain this in your own words. Number one is the struggle for survival. More young are produced and can survive in life, in the world. And there's a struggle for survival. It's hard to live. It's hard to find space, food, water, mates. It's hard to live for all organisms on the planet. And then survival of the fittest. Due to natural chance, variation, mutations, some organisms are more able to survive and reproduce than other organisms. And therefore, they are more fit and able to survive. So fitness describes how well an organism can survive and reproduce. It's very important that you understand. Adaptations allow, that's a horrible arrow. I don't have a writing pad. I'm trying to do this with a mouse. That is not good at all. Adaptations increase the likelihood, increase is the key word, the likelihood of survival and reproduction. So adaptations actually increase fitness. So adaptations are a good thing. Some examples of adaptations: camouflage and mimicry. Some of you might own camo. The goal of camo is to blend in with the environment so you're unable to be seen. For example, right here, some of you may have seen this picture. I might have shown it to you like in life science if you had me then, but right here you can see. Can you see it? Right there. Mountain lion. This is a little bit easier, but it's a little bit easier. You can see flounder. Flounder does not look like it does in Little Mermaid. My little girl loves princess movies, and I tried to explain to her one time. I'm like, yeah, Flounder doesn't really look like that. And she's like, what are you talking about, Dad? Yeah, he does. And I'm like, nah, nah, not really, but it's okay. If I were to ask you what is this, you might be tempted to say a bee, but it's not. It's actually a hoverfly. This is mimicry. Mimicry allows organisms to copycat harmful organisms, but therefore, since they look dangerous, their fitness level goes up. Both of these snakes are in Florida. This is a very common example of mimicry. One, if you get bit by one, you might die. Within 12, 24, you'll start feeling symptoms. It's very deadly. You get bit by another, nothing really. Maybe a little swelling, but that's about it. And so how do you know the difference? A bite from the notorious venomous eastern coral snake seems anticlimactic. There's little or no pain at the swelling at the site of the bite. Other symptoms can be delayed for 12 hours. However, if left untreated, The neurotoxin that attacks your nervous system begins to disrupt the connection between the brain and the muscles. Slurred speech, double vision, paralysis. And here's how you remember it. Red on yellow, kill a fellow. Red and black, friend of Jack. Red on yellow, here you go right here. Red on yellow, dead fellow. Red on black, it's king snake, friend of Jack. And so Darwin realized that natural selection is working through adaptations and fitness. And you can see here that the different finches that he saw while on his trip, they have specific beats tailored to the type of food that they eat. Now remember, Darwin didn't read Genesis correctly, so he's struggling like, why would God create every single species so exact? When he saw these variations and stuff, but we do see variations within kind. So natural selection kind of works like this. You have green and yellow grasshoppers. Hungry birds in this environment can see the brown ones way more. So the brown ones have a lower fitness level than the green ones. And so therefore, over time, green grasshoppers become more common. This is what's happening over time. So natural selection occurs in any situation in which more individuals are born than can survive. This is a very important slide. Let me try to draw a star. Nope, that was horrible. Let's try again. No, that's better. Or occurs in any situation in which more individuals are born than can survive. So there's that struggle. Natural variation, so this is mutations. Where does this variation come from? Through DNA. Mutations, random chance. Remember, evolution is all about random chance. Creation teaches that God is orchestrating his plan and his purposes. Evolution teaches everything's just random chance. Affects the ability to survive and reproduce. So mutations, random, some more likely to survive, some not. And that results in variation. Mutations, DNA is a source of variation. Those can also be adaptations. And fitness varies based upon those adaptations and variations. And so therefore there is differential reproductive success. Some organisms will survive and reproduce better than others. And so successful genes for a certain environment will be passed on to the next generation. Darwin argued that there is a common descent. Darwin proposed that over many generations, adaptations could cause species to evolve into whole new species. And so this is an example of this, the tree of life. According to evolution, we all came from one single-celled organism. So like I've said before, when you have a Thanksgiving dinner, you're not just eating with family, you're eating family. We're all related in a circle of life from the Lion King, right? He also proposed that living species are descended with modifications, so with changes from common ancestors. And this is known as descent with modification. So according to the principle of common descent, all species, sorry, there should be a space there, living and extinct, are descended from one single common ancestor. Now, this is not what the Bible, of course, teaches. The Bible teaches that God created kinds, perhaps the deer kind or the cat kind or whatever. But I want to just point this out. I would pause and read this slide, but evolutionary concepts of descent with modification ultimately require the addition of new information over time to get from a dinosaur to a bird, for example. The biblical model does not require new information. In fact, the biblical model is confirmed by the fact that we see a loss of information as species adapt to the environment. So what they're arguing here is this, and this is from the website, you can see at the bottom. What many Christian, creationists argue who believe in the Bible, and I hope you do too, is that God created kinds. And within that kind was all the genetic potential to make other types within that kind. If you see the dogs, right, there's so many different looking dogs, but they all came from an ancient gray wolf. So on the ark, was a golden retriever on the ark? Well, no, golden retrievers were bred, I think, in Scotland. Don't quote me on that. But, 18, 1700s. They weren't on the ark, but an ancient dog kind was. And so this is where we differ from evolution. Evolution teaches that this is a cladogram. Evolution teaches that we all came from a single place right here. Okay? We would be related to the chimpanzee, of course, humans. And these are derived characteristics. So jaws came here, lungs came here, claws and nails, feathers came over here with, the birds. Mammary glands, which makes mammals, right? Being able to feed our young with milk. Mammary glands developed right here. So if I were to ask you on this question, is a chimpanzee more closely related to a pigeon or to a lizard? And hopefully you would see that the answer would be pigeon because they're closer together on the cladogram. Now, this is an evolutionary cladogram. This is not a creationary cladogram. See, creationary cladogram, since God created according to kinds based upon the Bible, Genesis 1, God created like branches. We don't know how many kinds there were, were at creation, how many God created. But we see branches. So these are all perhaps different. I really need to get a writing pad. I know. I'm so sorry, but I'm trying my best here. These are all kinds. So within a kind, you can maybe see lots of variation. I'm not going to draw every single stick here. But you can get the gist that within the original kind, there could be a lot of variation that we see. So let's ask ourselves a few questions here. Number one. An inherited characteristic that increases an organism's ability to survive and reproduce in its specific environment. Well, hopefully you can see that the answer is B, adaptation. And number two, mutations have added information that code for proteins for evolution to happen. They must have added information, and that is also true. To get from a single cell, which has maybe thousands upon thousands of DNA codes, to you, which has like 3.5 billion, nucleotides, and you can see how much information needs to be added. Not only that, that information has to be successful, which means it has to be productive. It doesn't need to be bad. It needs to be good. It needs to give you an advantage to live. And so in order to believe in all these beneficial mutations, when now we see that most mutations are either neutral, they don't matter, or they're delivered, they're bad. Going to try to say a different word, but I failed. But they're harmful to the organism. It is not likely that all those good mutations could happen, even if you give millions and millions of years for it to happen. I also want to continue on and cover the last section with you, and this is 17.4. I'm sorry, this should say 17.4. Evidence of evolution, naturalistic reasoning. You can read over these objectives right here, but basically we're going to be talking about geographic distribution, briefly on fossils, homologous structures versus analogous structures, molecular biology, and then I'm going to talk to you about a video that I want you to watch. Okay, so what are the evidences, or what's the evidence for evolution? How do so many scientists believe in this? Well, I want to go through it with you because I want you to know what these evidences are. So the first one is biogeography. Darwin was seeing all these related species in different places. They look similar, but not exactly the same. Remember the ostrich and the emu and the rhea. And so study where organisms live now and where they and their ancestors lived in the past. This is biogeography. For example, you can see all these different types of organisms. They all are a little bit similar, but they all are different. This is biogeography. Not only that, Darwin saw the fossil record, which kind of ties into biogeography. Fossil record is exhibit A for evolution. There's so many interesting fossils to be looked at and seen and studied. And from his understanding of biogeography and fossils, Darwin came up with the idea that life has been evolving for millions of years, and it's been descended from common ancestors through descent with modification or small changes. So Darwin again believed that the Earth is 4.5, or he was thinking millions of years, but now modern science thinks that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Many Christians, again, I know there needs to be a space there. Many Christians believe that the Earth is thousands of years old. Now, not everyone. There's brilliant Christians who believe that the Earth is millions and millions of years old. Genesis debatably allows for lots of time there. But how do they get to these dates? I briefly want to talk to you about radiometric dating. So you can kind of see like the sand, but radiometric dating is kind of like a clock. And what they do is when you date rocks, like how old is this fossil? How old is this specimen? Well, they radiometrically date, and this is, of course, a little bit beyond the scope of biology, which is my realm, but I want to just briefly highlight to you, there are certain kinds of atoms in nature that are unstable and change. Well, we know these rates of change. So these are radioactive elements that break down. So for example, here's some ideas from a creationary website. But there's some assumptions being made with radiometric dating. This is a young Earth argument. Now, some Christians wouldn't have a problem with millions of years, and some Christians would. It's a fun debate to have. But first off, can the original number of unstable atoms be known? So in order to date something, you have to know how many was there in the first place. Can you know that? The rate of change was constant. Again, that's uniformitarianism. Everything's remained constant throughout Earth's history. Catastrophism argues differently. Catastrophism argues that no, there could have been rates of change, through catastrophic events like the flood, or all sorts of a meteor, all sorts of different things. And then the dot atoms were all produced by radioactive decay. What if those dot atoms were there to begin with? So those are all assumptions being made. Not only do we see biology and fossils being evidence, serving as evidence for evolution, we also see transitional fossils. Now, again, this is debatable because in order for land, land animals to exist, it came from the sea according to evolution. Well, there has to be a transitional form. And so one example of this form is called Tiktaalik. That's a fun name to say. And this was a fish, lobe-finned, like a lobe-finned fish, like a land mammal. It was between them. And so you can see that this was a intermediate species. So in order to get from species A to species B, you have to have some sort of transition. Fossil record is very, very sparse when it comes to transitional fossils. But you can see here, and if you want to go to this website, I would encourage you to do it. But they're obviously PhDs been studying this for their lives. They have studied and tried to argue that transitional fossils do not show what evolution shows. But that is what, again, secular science holds to be an evidence of evolution. Not only that, there is the ancient whale. That's an ancient whale. It's a crazy thing about it. But remember, life came from the sea, moved to land, and then the whales moved back into the water. And so this is pretty amazing to consider and even think about. And whale evolution is a really fun thing to get into. Not for right now, though. Homologous structures. These are structures that look the same. So you can see here that we have lots of little bones, fewer bones, a fewer number of larger bones and large bone. And it's similar through organisms. You can see that. This is known as homologous structures. Analogous structures look different, but they have the same function. More than that, there's also something called vestigial structures. So vestigial structures are kind of leftovers from evolution. Evolution, teaches that life has changed through time, so we should see leftovers possibly. And science argues that we have. For example, the pelvic bones of whales. This was used to help their legs when they were on land, perhaps. The pelvic bones have been argued to help whales mate, though. Not only that, the appendix for a long time has been held as a vestigial organ, a leftover from evolution. However, the appendix does have an important function, is to recolonize our intestines when something bad happens to us. You can read that if you want to pause it. Finally, two more evidences of evolution. Number one, embryological development. If you were to look at these pictures, they all look very similar right here. And so an evolutionary, scientist, or maybe someone who believes in evolution would say, look how similar we all look. We must have come from the same place. Obviously, we look very different when we develop, but maybe there's a difference, and I would argue there is, between coming from the same place due to chance or coming from the same holy, intelligent being who created us all, the same creator. Wouldn't life share similar qualities if we all came from the same creator? And then finally, the most important one now, how do we realize where, which organism is related to, closely related, or which ones are not closely related? Well, everything goes through DNA now. The more closely related DNA, is comparable to one organism and the other. If their DNA is very much alike, then they are closely related. This is based upon genetics. So this is why so much research is done on mice. A, they're inexpensive. B, their DNA is very similar to ours. And so when they do research and cancer research and drugs research, they can get an idea of how that drug will behave in a human body before moving on to a human trial. And so everything now really runs through DNA comparison. And so I'm going to post a link in this video. It's also on RenWeb, but I want you to watch a video about the evolution of finches. It's a brilliant video. I'll put the link in the bottom of this video. But until we talk again, guys, I hope you're doing well and are at peace during this pandemic. I hope that this video helped you understand the major points of natural selection and the evidences of evolution. Until next time, God bless.